It had been a grueling year-long investigation that pushed everyone involved to their limits. As the lead investigator, I spent endless nights sifting through evidence and following leads to piece the case together. The trial felt like the final chapter, the culmination of months of work that had consumed my life. Those 2 weeks in the courtroom were exhausting, both physically and mentally. But I knew the end was near, with the jury now holding the fate of the accused. Emotions ran high throughout the trial. For me, it was personal, confronting old memories I thought were long buried. The courtroom, heavy with tension, revealed a story many had tried to keep hidden. As the jury listened to the closing arguments, I felt a wave of relief mixed with anxiety. The jury was dismissed after hearing the final statements. It was late, almost 4 p.m., when the judge instructed them to return to their hotel for the weekend. The defendant was taken back to the Tarrant County Correction Center, and there would be no new developments until Monday. I headed back to my room at the Hilton Garden Inn in downtown Dallas, stopping at a bar for a quick beer and bite to eat. Halfway through my beer, I heard a female voice behind me. "Hey, cowboy, buy a girl a drink?" she asked. I turned and instantly recognized her. "Ashley? Ashley Marks?" "Yep, it's me," she said, smiling. I waved her over. "My God, how long has it been? 17 years? "Yeah, 17, she replied. Ashley had been one of my best friends in high school. We were known as the Four Musketeers back then, but that changed when her family moved to Austin during our senior year. "I've been covering the Jenkins trial," she said. "I saw you testify. I'm really sorry about Jolene. She didn't deserve that." I nodded, but stayed silent. Jolene didn't deserve to die like that. I would have preferred something more painful for her butcher. "So, how are you holding up, Bill?" she asked. "About as well as can be expected, considering the last 16 years of my life have been a sham." "At least you have your kids," she offered. "Yeah, legally they're mine. Trust me, you're their father in every way that counts," she said. "Doesn't make me feel any better," I sighed. She hesitated before speaking again. "I need to confess something. Every reporter in that courtroom wants your story, and I'd like to be the one to tell it. I know you're dealing with trust issues, but no one knows you like I do. We can sign a contract. I won't publish anything without your approval. My editor is on board. I just want to do this right." I knew she was right. Reporters from every major outlet had already approached me, and it was overwhelming. Deep down, I felt I could trust her, so I made my decision. "All right, Ashley, you've got a deal. So how do we do this? Do we talk here, or should we go to my room or yours? What's the plan?" "I've been wanting to visit the old homestead for a while. It's only about 2, maybe 2.5 hours west of here. It's still early, and the jury won't start deliberating until Monday, so we have the weekend. Why not drive out there? You can fill me in during the trip, and once we get there, maybe I can talk to your kids and parents if that's okay." I thought for a moment. A break from the trial would be good, and it might be nice to show Ashley around. "Sounds good," I said. "Where are you staying?" "The Hilton, right around the corner. You?" "Same. Want to grab a few things before we head out?" She nodded, and we agreed to meet by my truck in the parking lot. "You can't miss it," I said. "Big blue crew cab." "Classic Bill. Always the biggest truck around," she laughed. "Give me about 30 minutes once we get there so I can change and grab some things, okay?" I agreed, and we set off. The sun had just dipped below the horizon as we hit Interstate 20 toward Abilene, which I was grateful for. I hate driving into the sun. Ashley had swapped her reporter outfit for a knee-length denim skirt and a white Western-style blouse. She looked as stunning now as she did back in high school. I couldn't help but notice her legs, which brought back familiar memories. She caught my look and smiled. "I know what you're thinking, cowboy." "Oh, really?" I asked. "You're thinking, why didn't I end up with Ashley instead of Jolene?" I laughed. "Your reporter instincts tell you that." "No, it's the way you're checking out my legs, just like in school." "Thought I'd forgotten about that, huh?" "Well, legs like those are hard to forget," I admitted. She smiled and took out her recorder. "So, Ashley, is there a Mr. Right back in Austin?" "Nope. After my divorce, I threw myself into work. Trust issues, you know? Haven't met anyone worth my time since." "Sorry to hear that." She chuckled. "I doubt you really are. Anyway, shall we get this roadshow going?" "Yeah, let's do it." She placed the recorder on the dash. "Mind if I record this?" I shook my head. "Not at all. I want you to get it right." I took a sip of coffee, gathering my thoughts. "Well, you know, Steve, Jolene and I were really close after you left. I proposed to Jolene right after graduation, and she said yes. Steve and I joined the Marines right after high school, went through boot camp together in San Diego. We planned to get married after I finished my training. Steve and I were split up after boot camp. He went into infantry, and I got into computer electronics. He went to Camp Pendleton, and I was sent to Quantico, Virginia. A month later, Steve hurt his knee badly and got a medical discharge. You probably noticed his limp. Couldn't they have given him a desk job? Ashley asked. No, that's not how it works. In the Corps, everyone is a rifleman first, no matter their specialty. If you can't meet combat requirements, you're out. So he came home, and his dad used some connections to get him a county job. Right, his dad was a county commissioner, wasn't he? I nodded. Yeah, right up until he died. That's how Steve first got elected. So I finished school, came back, and got married. Steve was my best man, though I later found out he was also Jolene's best man, if you catch my drift. That witch, Ashley muttered. Anyway, I got stationed on the West Coast, and almost 9 months after our wedding, Brian was born. A year later, I was sent to Okinawa for a year. Before leaving, I let Jolene and Brian stay in the house I inherited from my grandparents. It made sense since both our parents were nearby. When I got back, we moved to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Less than 9 months later, Jessica was born. Jolene had a rough pregnancy and insisted I get a vasectomy. She said it could be reversed if we ever wanted more kids. Looking back, I wish I had known then what I know now. Didn't you notice the resemblance to Steve when they were born? Ashley asked. Fair question. You might remember people often said Steve and I could pass for brothers. We had the same hair color, eye color, even similar earlobes. As toddlers, they looked a lot like me and had their mother's eyes and nose. It wasn't until they got older that I saw the resemblance. I'll show you the baby pictures when we get to my house. Anyway, I left the Marines and we came home. Dad brought me into his computer shop and I started working for him. That meant a lot of travel. Did Jolene mind? Ashley asked. Not at all. In fact, she seemed to love it. Dad had clients everywhere. Dallas, Abilene, Amarillo, even Houston and Oklahoma City. While I was building up the client base, it gave Jolene plenty of time to invite Steve into our home. And our bed. I found out much later. You mean she actually slept with Steve in your bed? Ashley asked, shocked. Yeah, all the time. That's why I burned the bed and mattress after she was shot. I don't blame you, Ashley said. I also burned the couch, Steve's recliner, and Jolene's wedding dress. So, Steve was a regular at your house? Ashley asked. Yep, he even had his own recliner. I didn't mind back then because I thought he was a friend. He'd come over after church on Sundays and the kids called him Uncle Steve. Jolene pushed for that, which bothered me, but now I understand why. Hey, I need a coffee refill. How about a pit stop? I suggested. Ashley turned off her recorder. Sure, and I could use a smoke break. I nodded and pulled off at the next exit. After a short break, we hit the road again. Ashley set her recorder back on the dash. So, you had no clue Jolene was cheating with Steve? She asked. Nope, I was the clueless husband. She never disrespected me openly, and they were careful. When did you find out? She pressed. About a year ago. I was in Los Angeles for a month-long training for a client in San Antonio. Jolene and the kids stayed in touch daily. One weekend, Brian emailed me a picture of a fishing trip. Jolene and Steve had taken the kids to the lake. I handed my phone to Ashley. Check the album. Look at Brian holding the fish with Steve next to him. Ashley studied the photo. My God, they look so alike. Even the dimples. Yeah. Now, look at Jolene's left hand. Ashley zoomed in. No rings. Exactly. Guess where they were? I guided her to another folder. Find the one with an ashtray. She zoomed in and gasped. Is that? Yep. The wedding ring I gave her, along with my great-grandmother's engagement ring. And those cigarette butts? Steve's. That ashtray was on my nightstand in our bedroom. Ashley's eyes filled with tears. How could she do that to you? And you say Jessica sent this? Yeah. She helped her mom clean the house, which included emptying ashtrays. She saw the rings, took a picture, and sent it to me. She was pretty upset. I can imagine, Ashley replied. Did she say anything to Jolene? Not that I know of. I told her not to. I also asked her to take the rings, put them in her pocket, and mail them to me. Ashley chuckled. I bet Jolene was frantic. She was. Jessica did exactly what I asked, and Jolene went nuts trying to find the rings. She even had Steve come over to help. They tore the place apart, checked the trash, the sink traps, everything. I wish I could have recorded it. So, what did you do? Ashley asked. My course ended on a Friday, so I drove straight home. That Saturday night, Jolene met me outside, crying about losing grandmother's ring. She was in a panic. I played along, asking if she'd looked everywhere. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the rings. She almost passed out. How did you explain it? I just said a friend found them and mailed them to me. I didn't mention Jessica, knowing Jolene would probably lash out at her. I told Jolene, don't leave them in the ashtray next time Steve comes over. She froze, eyes wide, and started crying, insisting she loved me. Oh, sorry. I caught Ashley's look. Didn't mean to curse. That's okay, she said. I've heard worse. So what did you do then? I knew it was over. I didn't have solid proof of the affair yet, so I started gathering evidence. First, I wanted DNA tests to see if the kids were mine. I also set up surveillance equipment, motion-activated cameras, audio recorders, even a phone bug. Everything went to my home server and was backed up to the cloud. I installed it all while she was out shopping. The DNA tests were easy. One of our clients in Dallas was a lab that handled them. I got samples from the kids and told them not to mention it to their mom. I took my own sample and waited. Steve came over the next Sunday, fell asleep in his usual recliner, and I managed to swab his cheek. A week later, I got the results. 99.9% chance Steve was the father of both kids. They'd been at it for at least 16 years. And you had no clue? Ashley asked. Nope, not a hint. If I'd analyzed things carefully, maybe I could have figured it out. But until then, she gave me no reason to doubt her. Our sex life was normal, even after the kids were born. I just needed more proof. A week after setting up the gear, I got my first video evidence. I went to Oklahoma City for a few days to install a server. The kids were at my parents' house, so Jolene was alone. Not long after I left, she called Steve to come over. I called from my hotel to let her know I'd arrived. She said she loved me, but by then I didn't care. I logged into the home server and waited. Around 9 p.m., they were in our bed. No protection, which really infuriated me. But the worst part was what they said. What did they say? Ashley asked. Hold on, I need to take this exit. We're about 30 minutes away. I had to focus. It was getting dark, and this road had no lights, guardrails, or markings. It was easy to end up in a ditch, or worse. This area was also known for Steve's former pill-running associates. Most were arrested or gone after Steve went down, but I stayed cautious. I clicked on the high beams, turned on the light bar, flipped on the police scanner, and grabbed my pistol from the glove box. I wasn't taking any chances. We finally reached my house, and Ashley noticed the DPS car in the driveway. Who's that? Ashley asked. Security, I replied. They've been watching the place since Steve's arrest. Some of his buddies tried to burn it down for revenge, but we stopped them. I tapped the pistol at my side, and she got the message. Are we safe here? She asked. I nodded. Yeah, we've got 24/7's protection. DPS is also watching my folks and the kids. Most of Steve's buddies are locked up, but we're not taking chances. They even had to fire most of the sheriff's department. Let's head in, and I'll introduce you. I pulled into the garage, and we walked over to the patrol car. The DPS officer stepped out. Bill Jennings? He asked. Thought you were in Dallas for the trial. We shook hands. It just went to the jury this afternoon. This is Ashley Marks, a reporter from the Austin Statesman. She's with me for the weekend, covering Steve's story. He tipped his hat. Nice to meet you, ma'am. Turning to me, he added, all quiet so far. It's been calm since the Rangers cleaned up that last group. My replacement will be here soon. Thanks. We shook hands, and he said, Y'all have a good night. You too, I replied. Inside, I started the coffee pot and gave Ashley a tour. The house was built in 1866 by my ancestor, William Bryan Jennings, after the Civil War. It's been expanded and modernized over the years, but still had spots showing the original construction. It had 5 bedrooms, a 3-car garage, and a wraparound porch. The rooms included the kids' bedrooms, the master bedroom, a craft room for Jolene, and a playroom for the kids. I offered Ashley the master bedroom since it had a private bath. I planned to sleep on the futon in my den, where I'd been staying since confirming Jolene's infidelity. But Ashley refused. Nonsense, she said. The bed's big enough for both of us. We're adults and can handle this. Her reply threw me off, but I agreed. All right, if you say so. She smiled and led me downstairs. You've got a story to tell, so let's get started, she said. But let me call the kids first to let them know we'll visit tomorrow. I called my parents' house, spoke with my dad and the kids, and arranged to meet for lunch. I grabbed some coffee and joined Ashley in the living room. I noticed a stack of DVDs and went to retrieve them from my office. This should help explain a lot, I said. Her eyes widened. How much video do you have? She asked. A lot. Some are from cameras in the house, others from my office. I've scanned all the documents and have pictures and audio too. Everything's here with backup copies. I picked out the right disc and inserted it into the DVD player. Fair warning, it's graphic. I'm ready, she said. I told her this video confirmed my suspicions and to listen carefully. The footage showed Jolene entering the bedroom with Steve. As they undressed, Jolene took off her rings and tossed them in the ashtray. Steve smirked and stubbed out his cigarette on them. "Screw him and his great-grandmother's ring," Jolene said, laughing. Ashley winced, tears in her eyes. I fast-forwarded through the explicit parts, which she appreciated. This goes on for an hour, but it's what they say afterward that's the real kicker. "Thanks for skipping that," Ashley said. "It's one thing to know, it's another to see it." I played the part where they lay back, smoking. Steve put out his cigarette on the rings. "I'm pregnant again," Jolene said. "Looks like you're going to be a dad." Steve frowned. "Weren't you on the pill?" "Mostly, but I might have missed a day or two. Why can't you use protection?" "I hate those things," he replied. "You know the rule. No rubbers." "Well, you'll need to get another feticide or convince Pencil Prick it's his." "I can't do it again, Steve. I've had 3 already, and the last one nearly eliminated me. I ended up in the ER. Plus, Bill had a vasectomy after Jessica, remember? That was your idea." "So what now?" Steve asked. "I want to leave and marry you. I think Bill's onto us." "I'm not the marrying type," Steve replied. "A family would mess up what I've got. Bill works, I get the benefits. And don't worry about Bill. He's so clueless, we could do it right in front of him." "Can't you handle him like those other guys?" she suggested. "Those were illegals. No one cared. It's different with a respected man." "Maybe you can arrange an accident," Jolene said. "People crash on Indian Trail all the time." "There might be something, but let's not rush. Maybe poison him slowly. We'll deal with him eventually after the kids are grown. You'll get his insurance and part of his business. In the meantime, go to the new clinic in Abilene. I'll keep an eye on Bill. If he does anything, like seeing a lawyer, I'll handle it." Jolene nodded. "Okay, baby. You're the man." They resumed their affair. I stopped the video. Ashley shook her head, tears streaming. "I hate her. And you stayed with her for 17 years? Please tell me you saw a lawyer." "I did, right after this." I paused. "I went to see Alan Jackson, our family lawyer. What he said chilled me. At our meeting, I showed Alan the DNA report and video. He explained that, in Texas, divorce could be filed on grounds of infidelity or cruelty. While not a crime, infidelity could affect asset distribution and support. But Alan warned the real problem was Steve. "Steve controls this county," he said. "He owns the sheriff's department and most judges. In Texas, you must file in the county you've lived in for the last 90 days. No judge here will hear your case. Plus, Jolene's pregnancy could delay the divorce, as courts won't finalize until the baby is born, no matter who the father is. One more thing. Steve knows you might file for divorce. He ordered us to inform him if you try." "Wait, he ordered you to break attorney-client privilege?" I asked. Alan nodded. "Yes, Bill, I don't like it, but I won't end up in a shallow grave on Indian Trail." "I'm sorry, I have no choice." I was stunned. "Well, I don't have a choice either. You're fired. I want all our files and backups now." "I expected that," he replied, pointing to boxes by the door. He scribbled notes on a piece of paper and handed it to me. "Thanks," I said, realizing I'd given him an out again. "I thought you two were friends. Is there no way you can overlook this for the kids' sake?" "Could you accept being unknowingly cheated on for 17 years? I asked. "No, I couldn't. Let me help you with the files. It's the least I can do." He grabbed the boxes and we walked to the truck. Outside, he glanced around. "Call the contacts on that list," he whispered. "The authorities are looking into Steve. Don't delay. Steve might have you under surveillance." "I'm sorry. Maybe we can make amends later." I shook his hand. "Thanks, Alan. I understand." Driving back, I thought about my dad's words. Firing Alan wasn't the issue. I knew he would support me. My real concern was what Steve might do to my family. I called the contacts Alan had given me and set up meetings with a top family law attorney, a state prosecutor, and a Texas Ranger in Dallas. Later, I spoke to my dad and told him that I had fired Alan. At first, he remained calm. "Why?" he asked. I showed him the DNA and video evidence and explained Alan's warnings. His demeanor changed instantly. "Damn. I knew Steve was trouble, but this is worse. We need to get the kids out." I agreed but wasn't sure how to proceed. My dad had a plan. When are your meetings in Dallas? Tomorrow, I replied. Tell Jolene you're going to Phoenix for a few days. I'll go with you to help get the kids packed. They can stay with us. This might throw him off for a bit. Are you going to tell the kids? I have to, I said. They deserve to know. I won't speak badly about their mom, but they're old enough to make their own choices. All right, Dad said. We're with you. I called my son Brian and told him that they'd be staying with their grandparents starting today. What's going on? Brian asked, confused. I'll explain later. Just make sure you and Jessica are home after school. Grandpa will pick you up. Okay, Dad. Love you. I heard the slight embarrassment in his voice as he added, Love you too. A few minutes later, my secretary called. Bill, Steve Jenkins is here. I placed my pistol on the desk within reach, turned on the recorder, and told her to send him in. I also alerted my dad. Steve walked in like he owned the place and immediately noticed the weapon. Nice piece. Didn't know computer geeks carried guns, he said smugly. What do you want, Steve? I asked, getting straight to the point. Good. Straight to the point, he replied. I know you're meeting with Alan Jackson today. So what? I shot back. If you're thinking about divorce, forget it, he said coldly. I don't care if you know about us, but I'm not going to let you drag me through court. Why, Steve? I asked, my frustration rising. We were friends. How long has this been going on? Since prom, he said with a smirk. Remember? You danced with Ashley while Jolene and I snuck off, he continued. Then we picked things up again when you were at Quantico. Jolene got on birth control, but conveniently skipped it around your wedding. He grinned. I was your best man, remember? 9 months later, Brian was born. His smirk deepened. We got back together while you were stationed in Okinawa. She got pregnant, but she had an abortion. I even slept with her the day you came back. 9 months later, Jessica was born. I suggested she push you to get a vasectomy. We didn't want you having kids of your own. It'd be too complicated. She messed up a few times and had to get feticides, but your insurance covered it. We had it good until you got nosy. Now, here's the deal, Cuck. No divorce, no secrets. I'll come over whenever I want. If you're in bed, I'll drag you out. Remember, I'm in charge. If you try to stop me, think about the kids. Kids get hurt all the time. You touch the kids and I'll take you out, I warned. Talk all you want. I run this county. I own the sheriff and judges. Now I own you. Play along or it's lights out for you and the kids. Maybe I'll have some fun with your daughter first. You'd hurt your own children? I asked. I grew up. You should too, Cuck. Steve walked out. I stopped the recording, burned it onto a DVD, and sent copies to my dad and Dallas contacts. Then I called my father. Dad, check your email. We need to act now. He just threatened the kids. Understood, Dad replied. I'll make a call. You get Brian and Jess to my house. Call the school and tell them Jolene and Steve aren't allowed near the kids. I agreed, immediately informing the school to prevent Jolene or Steve from picking up the children. Then I called Brian. Get your sister and go straight to Grandpa's. No questions. What's happening, Dad? Brian asked. I'll explain later. Just do what I say. No contact with Mom or Steve, understood? Got it, Dad. I grabbed my weapon, the DVD, and left the office, heading straight for my truck. Dad would meet me at the house soon. He always kept his word. 15 minutes later, I arrived. Steve's truck wasn't there, but Jolene's car was. Good. I entered cautiously, hand on my holstered pistol, checking for threats. The house was quiet. I stepped inside, and Jolene came down the stairs. Bill, you're home early. Is something wrong? She asked. I stared at her. Is Steve here? Why would he be? She replied. You know why. Maybe for some afternoon fun or to plan my liquidation, I shot back. Her eyes widened, hand covering her mouth. Yeah, Jolene. I know everything. My God, I'm sorry. Nonsense. Watch what your lover said to me, I said, putting the DVD into the player. Then you have 30 seconds to grab your stuff and get out. I played the DVD, and her expression changed as Steve's threats filled the screen. Bill, it's not what you think. Let me explain. Steve was just talking trash. We can work this out, she pleaded. Are you kidding me? I snapped. You both conspired against me from the start, denied me my own children, and plotted my end of life. Now Steve is threatening his own kids if I don't obey. What kind of people are you? Get your stuff and leave. Now. I had never raised my voice at her before, and she was visibly shaken. I grabbed her left hand, yanked off her rings, pocketing my grandmother's, then took off my own ring and slapped it into her hand. Choke on it, I growled. Bill, please don't do this. I'm sorry, she sobbed. Yeah, you're sorry. A sorry excuse for a wife. Now get out. I threw her purse at her, knocking her chest. Move. Outside, as we walked to her car, she turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Where will I go?" she asked. "Stop crying. You got what you wanted. Go to Steve's, your mom's, or straight to hell. I don't care." Just then, 2 vehicles approached, Dad's truck in the lead, Steve's right behind. Jolene instantly stopped crying and smirked. "Let's see who leaves now," she sneered. "You and the kids will beg us to end it." "You'd really eliminate us?" I asked. "In a heartbeat, and I'd enjoy every second," she replied. Dad swung his truck to block Steve's path. Steve braked hard, narrowly missing him. He jumped out of his truck, and so did Dad, rifle in hand. "What the hell are you doing, Jennings?" Steve yelled. "Enforcing the restraining order," Dad replied. "What restraining order?" Steve snapped. "The one that keeps you both 500 feet away from my family and property. Now get in your truck and leave," Dad said, not lowering the rifle. Steve froze, unused to being challenged like this. 2 DPS vehicles with flashing lights arrived, blocking his truck. 4 officers stepped out, weapons drawn. "We'll handle it from here, Mr. Jennings," one officer said, approaching Steve. Dad lowered his rifle as the officer served Steve the restraining order. The officer then turned to Jolene and me. "Is that her?" he asked, nodding toward Jolene. Dad nodded. The officer approached Jolene and handed her a paper. "Mrs. Jennings, this order requires you to stay 500 feet from the Jennings family and their properties. Violate it and you'll be arrested. Do you understand?" "Yes," Jolene replied quietly. "Excuse me, officer," I interrupted, pulling a digital recorder from my pocket. "Yes, Mr. Jennings?" I hit play. The officer listened to Jolene's threats against me and the kids. Jolene looked on the verge of tears. The officer stared at her, then took out his handcuffs. "Mrs. Jennings, you're under arrest. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." After cuffing her and reading her rights, he radioed for another officer to arrest Steve. "You'll pay for this, a-hole!" Jolene hissed as they led her away. "All of you will!" A news van pulled up, and a reporter and camera crew approached just as Steve was being cuffed, capturing it on film for the evening news. Steve was livid. "Do you know who I am?" he yelled at the officer. "Yes, sir, and I don't care. You're under arrest." "I'll have your badge," Steve fumed. I realized I hadn't mentioned their liquidation plot, but I didn't have the evidence on me. Part of it was still in the DVD player. Still, my contacts in Dallas had what they needed. The news van moved aside as patrol cars prepared to leave. The reporter approached me with Dad close behind. "Mr. Jennings, why was Commissioner Jenkins arrested?" she asked. "Because threatening liquidation is still a crime, even for politicians like Steve and his girlfriend. Now I need to care for my kids." I walked away with Dad, leaving the stunned reporter behind. Steve had always been seen as a family values man, but that image had just been shattered. Next, I headed to my parents' house to tell the kids the truth. It hurt to reveal that Uncle Steve was their biological father, but they deserved to know. They didn't want to believe it at first, but I showed them the DNA results. "I don't care what that paper says," Jessica said. "You're my dad, always." "I agree," Brian added. I hugged them, proud of their strength. After some tears and farewells to my parents, I went back home, packed a few things, and left for Dallas. "Is that when you learned how bad things really were?" Ashley interrupted. "Yeah," I replied, sipping my coffee. "I met Dave Brooks, a tough Dallas attorney. He'd arranged for all 3 contacts I'd called to meet together. "Sorry to spring this on you," Dave said. "After your last video, we felt it best to meet as a group." He introduced me to John Hancock, a state prosecutor who took charge. "Mr. Jennings, I'm sorry for what you've been through. We have strong evidence against Steve Jenkins: pill running, weapon smuggling, human trafficking, and links to 6 liquidations. Your wife was involved, especially in the trafficking. We wanted more time to build our case, but the threats against you forced us to act sooner," he continued. Don Jacobs from the Texas Rangers added that the sheriff's department was compromised. Plans were in place to replace them with Rangers and DPS officers. "As for your divorce," Dave said, "I'm pushing for an annulment due to fraud. Otherwise, we'll file for infidelity and cruelty. You should retain your assets and gain custody." We spent another hour discussing strategies. Dave handed me a DVD with evidence of Jolene's activities, some involving deputies. John outlined their plan. "I'm seeking the judicial execution for Jenkins. Your wife might get life without parole. I must warn you, your lives are in danger. If you need help, call us immediately." "I understand," I replied, shaking their hands. On the drive back, my mind raced. My best friend was a criminal, and my wife had been his accomplice. How had I missed all this? Back in town, I got a frantic call from Brian. "Dad, come home now," he urged. "What's happening?" I asked. "Just get here," he shouted, hanging up. I floored it, reaching home in 20 minutes. Ambulances and DPS cars surrounded the house. I rushed to the door as paramedics wheeled out a gurney. I stopped them, lifting the sheet to reveal Jolene's face. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jennings," the paramedic said. "She's gone." Strangely, I felt no real sorrow. Inside, I found Steve on another gurney, his left shoulder shredded by a rifle blast, but still alive. The kids and Dad stood off to the side, unharmed. I avoided the blood as I made my way to them. "What happened?" I asked. Dad explained. "We came to grab some things. Then Steve and Jolene showed up. Must have made bail. Jessica and Jolene started arguing, and Steve pulled out a weapon. I had my rifle with me, so I stepped in just as he did. Jolene tried to stop him, but he fired and hit her in the stomach. I shot him in the shoulder and called emergency services. Brian was the one who called you." "I'm sorry, son," Dad said, his voice heavy. "It's okay, Dad. You did what you had to," I reassured him. I remembered that the security system had been recording the whole incident. It was all on video. I showed the footage to an officer, who immediately asked for a copy. I paused my story for a moment and took a sip of coffee. "Do you still have that video?" Ashley asked quietly. "Yes, I do." I played the DVD for her, showing Jolene and Steve entering the house, Jessica confronting them, and the chaos that ensued. When the struggle ended with gunshots, I stopped the video. "That's when Brian called me," I said. "You know the rest." Ashley wiped her eyes. "I think that's enough for tonight," I said softly, feeling emotionally drained. "I'm going out for a smoke." She followed me. "Mind if I join you?" We poured fresh coffee and stepped onto the porch. The stillness of the night surrounded us, and the silence lingered until Ashley finally broke it. "I'd forgotten how dark and peaceful it is out here," she said, glancing around. "City life makes you forget." She hesitated before adding, "Bill, you need closure, or this will eat you alive." "Easier said than done," I replied. "How do you move on when the person you loved was lying the whole time?" "I feel robbed of my life. The kids aren't even mine." "I get it," she said. "My husband cheated too, but not everyone is like that." "Yeah, I know," I said quietly, taking a drag from my cigarette. She gently put her arm around me. "I'm here for you, Bill. Whatever you need." I hugged her, appreciating the comfort she offered. It felt good to have her support in such a difficult time. "I've often thought about what would have happened if we'd gotten together in high school," Ashley said softly. "I've thought about that too," I admitted. "Maybe if my dad hadn't moved us to Austin, things would have been different." "You know," she said, "I was jealous of Jolene back then." "Really? But you were with Steve," I said, surprised. "Only because you were with Jolene," she confessed. I always had doubts about Steve. He even told me he wasn't the type to settle down. "No use dwelling on it now," I replied. "Besides, if we had been together, you might not have become a big city reporter." "Maybe," she said with a smile. "But sometimes I think I'd give it all up to be with a good man." "I believe you would." After a while, we went back inside. I opted to sleep on the couch, as I had since Jolene's death. Even with a DPS officer stationed outside, I still felt uneasy about Steve's friends. Plus, I wasn't sure where things might go with Ashley, and she seemed to understand. "Just don't make it a habit, cowboy," she teased with a smile. I slept well that night and woke to the smell of bacon. "Rise and shine," Ashley called, standing over me in a long t-shirt. "Breakfast is ready." I got up and headed to the kitchen. She had really gone all out. Pancakes, bacon, sausage, grits, toast, eggs, biscuits, gravy, and peanut butter. Just how I liked it. "A guy could get used to this," I said with a grin. "I hope you like it. It's been a while since I cooked breakfast for anyone," she said, pouring me fresh coffee. "It smells amazing. You definitely have my mom's seal of approval." "Well, dig in. We've got a busy day ahead," she said. "So, what's the plan?" I asked between bites. "First, we visit your family. Then we'll stop by Jolene's mother's place. If there's time, we can visit the cemetery. And if you want breakfast like this tomorrow, we'll need to hit the grocery store." I devoured my meal, pausing only to sip coffee and compliment her cooking. When I finished, I hugged her and gave her a kiss on the cheek. "That was fantastic," I said. "I'd better get ready." "Please do. You're great, but you could use a shave," she teased with a laugh. Upstairs, I thought about Ashley as I showered. In just 24 hours, I was falling for her all over again. Could it be we were meant to be? Ashley was already dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, looking just like she did in school. She grabbed her laptop bag and purse, urging me to hurry. We drove to my parents' house, where the kids ran out to greet us. I introduced them to Ashley, and we went inside. Ashley explained her plans and then asked to speak to each family member privately. My mom went to the kitchen to prepare lunch while Dad led me to the den. Meanwhile, Ashley spent about an hour with Jessica before moving on to talk with Brian. During that time, Dad and I steered clear of any mention of Jolene or Steve. A couple of hours later, Ashley came into the den and asked to speak with my dad. I took the kids outside to toss around a football. An hour later, Ashley joined us. The kids had really warmed up to her by then, and we decided to play a quick game of touch football, Jessica and I versus Ashley and Brian. For the first time in a long while, it felt like we were a happy family again. After lunch, we began preparing to leave. As we were heading out, Jessica caught me at the door. "Dad," she whispered, hugging me tightly, "if you don't ask her to marry you, I'll kick your bum." I laughed and promised I'd think about it. As we drove away, I asked, "How did the interviews go?" "They went well," Ashley replied. "I know trust is an issue, so let me explain why I spoke to everyone privately." She had anticipated my thoughts. "It's standard practice to get independent accounts," she continued. "I needed them to speak freely without any outside influence. I hope you understand." "I do," I said. "You're just doing your job. So, did you find out anything new?" "Yes," she said. "Jessica mentioned that Steve had been making advances toward her for some time." "That prick," I muttered under my breath. Ashley nodded. "Your family loves you. They had concerns about Jolene but didn't interfere because they didn't have solid proof. Anything else?" I asked. "I learned what it feels like to be part of a close family," she said softly. "I really enjoyed my time with you and the kids." "We enjoyed it too," I said. "You made a great impression." We arrived at the apartment complex where Jolene's mother, Myrna, lived. "Do you want to talk to her alone?" I asked. "No," Ashley said. "You both need to clear the air." Myrna opened the door slowly. She was now living alone, having lost both her husband and daughter. "How are you?" I asked, giving her a hug. "I'm managing, Bill, thanks," she replied, before hugging Ashley. Ashley Marks, still as lovely as ever. We all sat down, and I began explaining why we had come. "What can I tell you?" Myrna asked, looking uneasy. "Mrs. Carter," Ashley said gently, "you knew about Jolene and Steve's affair. Why didn't you tell Bill?" Myrna looked down, ashamed. "Yes, I knew," she admitted. "I'm sorry, Bill, I should have said something." "How long did you know?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "Since the beginning," Myrna confessed. "When you were in Okinawa, Steve was practically living with Jolene. I warned her, but she wouldn't listen." "If she wanted to be with Steve, why did she marry me?" I asked, frustration creeping into my voice. "I would have let her go." "She was confused," Myrna explained. "You were her stability. Steve was her excitement." "Sorry, Myrna," I interrupted, shaking my head. "She had his kids and plotted to get rid of us. That's not love." "I know it's hard to believe," Myrna said softly. "But she did love you, at least at the start." Ashley leaned forward. "So, what changed?" "People change," Myrna said. "Steve had control over her. She warned me to stay out of it, which is why I stopped visiting." "Did you know about the feticides?" Ashley asked, her voice steady. Myrna nodded. "Yes, I knew. I even suggested she divorce you, but she laughed and said she'd inherit everything from you." "How long ago was that?" Ashley asked. "About 1.5 years ago," Myrna replied. I finally spoke up, my voice quiet but firm. "Myrna, did your husband know about all of this?" "I think he did," she said. "He had a heated argument with Steve just before the accident. Myrna's husband was a meticulous mechanic. The crash was labeled a fluke, though they couldn't explain how a brake line failed and a tie rod came loose. "It's all in the past now, isn't it?" Myrna sighed. "I understand why you didn't come to the memorial." Ashley looked at me. "You cremated her in her wedding dress? Why?" "I told you I burned it. She was wearing it." "And the ring?" Ashley asked. "Not the engagement ring," I clarified. "Interesting," Ashley noted. Myrna spoke up. "Thank you for ensuring I got Jolene's IRA. It's been a big help." "She had an IRA?" Ashley asked. "Yes, about $350,000, Myrna said. "I didn't know about it," I added. "I put the rest in a trust for the kids." "Anything else?" Ashley asked. "No, I think that's everything," Myrna said. I hugged her. "Feel free to visit the kids anytime." As we walked to the truck, Ashley asked, "You really cremated her in that dress?" It felt right. At the cemetery, we visited Jolene's marker, simple and unadorned. "I see you used her maiden name," Ashley noted. "She didn't deserve ours," I replied. Ashley placed a hand on my chest. "You still have a lot of anger. Have you ever mourned her?" The truth was, I hadn't. I felt no love left, only betrayal. A tear rolled down my cheek. Ashley pulled me into a hug. "Let it out," she urged. That was all it took. I broke down, sobbing as she held me close. After a while, I looked at Ashley and wiped a tear from her face. "What's this?" I asked. She smiled faintly. Remember, she was my friend too. The four of us. You, me, Steve, Jolene. I loved her like a sister back then. I hate who she became, but I still loved her. And you loved her for a long time. You married her and raised 2 kids together. That has to count for something. "I guess you're right," I replied. "Damn straight, cowboy." She looked me in the eyes. "I'm here for you now, Bill, and I'll be here as long as you need or want me. Got it?" "I got it," I said, smiling. She patted my chest. "Let's get to the store before it's too late. What about dinner?" After a moment's thought, I suggested, "How about a trip to Charlie's? I hear they make a great steak and there's a band tonight." "Are you asking me out on a date in front of your wife's ashes?" she teased. "Why not?" I grinned. She laughed, kissed me, and looked at Jolene's marker. "Bye, Jolene. Your husband is taking me out on a date." I glanced at the marker. "Goodbye, my dear," I whispered. I thought I heard a faint sob, but figured it was just the wind playing tricks. I quickly made my way back to the truck. "You okay?" Ashley asked. "Yeah," I replied, starting the engine. "Let's stock up for breakfast and get ready for tonight." We stopped at the farmer's market and picked up eggs, bread, milk, bacon, and everything else Ashley thought we needed. Then we headed back to the house. Being there with Ashley made it feel like a real home again. I showered, shaved, and waited while Ashley got ready. She came downstairs in a denim skirt and white blouse, finishing the look with cowboy boots. She looked stunning. I offered her my arm and we headed out to the truck. Charlie's was known for its steaks and had a live band. After dinner, we grabbed a beer and eyed the dance floor where couples were dancing. "Want to dance?" I asked. "Sure," she replied, smiling. We danced through fast waltzes, slow songs, and even line danced. Ashley stayed by my side, only taking a couple of breaks. During a slow dance, she suddenly stopped, kissed me deeply, and whispered in my ear, "I love you, Bill Jennings. Always have, always will." There it was, out in the open. "I love you too, Ashley Marks," I replied, my heart racing. She licked her lips nervously. "Take me home, cowboy." Who could resist? "Let's get out of here then." She smiled, grabbed my hand, and led me to the truck. "Take me home," she purred. "You got it, babe," I grinned, driving us back. We arrived, parked in the garage, and I closed the door. She looked at me, eyes shining. "I'm all yours if you want me." "Make love to me," was just one of many things she said as the night unfolded. We finally settled down, lying in each other's arms. Just 36 hours ago, I was a broken man. Now, I had Ashley showing me how to love again. I decided to take a chance. "Ashley," I began. She turned to look at me. "What is it, cowboy?" I reached into the nightstand drawer, pulling out a small box containing my great-grandmother's engagement ring. I explained its history and meaning to me. "This ring isn't just a hand-me-down. It represents over 100 years of Jennings family history." She looked at me, tears in her eyes. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes to both. I'll marry you and proudly wear this ring." "There's just one condition," she added seriously. "Condition?" I asked, confused. "Promise you'll get your vasectomy reversed. I want a house full of kids, and maybe one day we'll pass this ring to our grandkids." I smiled, slipped the ring on her finger, and kissed her deeply. We made love again and fell asleep in each other's arms. The next morning, I woke to the smell of bacon. After my morning routine, I found Ashley making breakfast. I kissed her, and we enjoyed the meal, chatting about our plans. After eating, we packed for the trip back to Dallas. We showered together, which led to more lovemaking. Feeling closer than ever, I decided to call the kids and share the news. I put the call on speaker. "Woohoo!" Brian yelled when I announced our engagement. Jessica was just as thrilled. "Way to go, Dad. You got a real winner there," she said. "Congratulations," my dad added. "Welcome to the family, Ashley." "Thank you, Mr. Jennings," she replied. "Mr. Jennings was my dad," he laughed. "Call me Pop." "Okay, Pop," Ashley beamed. "We're so happy for you," my mom said. "Do you have a date yet?" "Not yet," I admitted. "I need to settle some things in Austin first." I had one more request for the kids. Brian, I think you and Jessica should visit your Grandma Carter sometimes. She misses you. What do you say? Okay, Dad. Attaboy. I knew they'd do the right thing. We said our goodbyes and loaded the truck. As we drove, something Ashley mentioned stuck with me. What are your plans for work? Long-distance relationships can be tough. Well, the managing editor of the Daily Record is retiring, she said. I sent my resume last week and they're interested. He won't retire for 3 months, so I have time to wrap things up at the Statesman. What if you don't get the job? No big deal. I'll quit and move in with this guy I know, she teased. The board wants a woman with experience, so I think I have a good shot. But if not, I can freelance, blog, or even write a book. I'd rather spend my time with you. I like that plan best, I said. We closed up the house and I picked a few flowers. I'd like to make a stop before we head out. Oh, you got a secret girlfriend, she teased. You know better. I knew she was joking, but the question still stung. You're right, I'm sorry, she said. We've both been burned. I just thought it was time to start putting things behind me, I said. Good for you, she replied. We stopped at the cemetery and approached Jolene's resting place. I knelt, placing the flowers in the vase beside the marker. By the way, Jolene, Ashley and I are getting married. Thought you should know, I said. She's gone, you know, Ashley replied. I know. Just feels good to say it out loud. Then Ashley stepped forward. And if the kids agree, I plan to adopt them, she added. After our brief goodbyes, we returned to the truck. You really want to adopt them? I asked. Absolutely. They deserve a mother they can trust. Are you okay with that? Of course. I realized then that marrying Ashley was the best decision for all of us. She would be the loving, strong mother Jessica needed. The ride back to Dallas was mostly quiet. Ashley worked on her story while I reflected on the past months. When we arrived at the hotel, she turned to me. No need to keep your room. The paper's covering mine until this is over. Why not stay with me? I agreed. At least let me cover part of the cost, I offered. She waved it off. Just pay for our dates, okay? That night, we went out for steak, danced, and enjoyed another night together. The next morning, we got to the courthouse early. The jury started deliberating, and Ashley went off to do her reporter duties. By 1:30, the jury had reached a verdict. Steve stood emotionless as the judge asked if the jury had decided. We have, Your Honor, the foreman replied. The judge read the paper and turned back. In the case of the People v. Steve Jenkins, the jury finds the defendant guilty on all charges, with the penalty being end of life, he announced. Steve's gamble to avoid the judicial execution had failed. He was found guilty of liquidation, conspiracy, smuggling, human trafficking, and more. The jury was polled, each agreeing to the verdict and sentence. Mr. Jenkins, the judge said, this case warrants the judicial execution. You are to be taken to the state prison at Huntsville and put to end of life as prescribed by law. May God have mercy on your soul. My attorney motioned for me to follow him. We caught up with the officers escorting Steve out. The attorney handed him 2 forms. What now? Steve grumbled. One is to relinquish parental rights to Brian and Jessica. The other outlines the disposition of your assets after your execution, 1/3 to Myrna Carter, 1/3 to Brian, and 1/3 to Jessica. Defeated, Steve signed both. Happy now? He spat. I will be, I said. By the way, Ashley and I are getting married, and she's adopting the kids. Enjoy hell. We left, and I didn't see Steve again until his execution day. And yes, I did visit his grave later, but I made sure Ashley wasn't around. Finally, the nightmare ended, and a new chapter began. Ashley's story about the ordeal went viral, earning her a Pulitzer Prize. She left the Statesman for a job as managing editor of the Daily Record, quickly boosting its circulation. We opted for a small wedding in our backyard. Ashley's parents attended, and Brian and Jessica were our best man and maid of honor. After we exchanged vows, the minister introduced us as Mr. and Mrs. William Jennings and family. Brian hugged Ashley. Welcome to the family, Mom. Tears in her eyes, Ashley embraced both kids. I love you both. My dad handed us an envelope containing tickets for a Caribbean cruise. Enjoy your honeymoon, he said. 10 months later, Ashley gave birth to twins, William Frederick and Alicia Marie. Shortly after, a local politician approached me about running for Steve's old seat. Thanks, but no, I replied. My dad always said, power corrupts.